Aristotle espouses all our actions should promote and maintain human flourishing, or eudaimonia, which is the capacity of every human being to strive to reach his or her potential. Aristotle's words reflect my life's telos, which is to procure my best possible self. In my pursuit of eudaimonia, or flourishing, I have come to really understand my identity. When I was young, I learned the lyrics to a church song titled, "I Am a Child of God." Although I sang this song along with the other children in church every Sunday, I didn't quite understand what it truly meant to be a child of God. All I knew was this: as a child of a heavenly king, the ruler of the universe, I was a princess. And as a young girl, intrigued with fairy tale princes such as Cinderella, Snow White, and Sleeping Beauty, I embraced my divine birthright. I embraced this idea that I was a princess. I started to imagine this image for myself: a sparkling tiara, glass slippers, and a dazzling gown. At the age of 4.5, however, I suffered an ordeal. And sometime after that ordeal, I gradually felt compelled to seek for an alternative version of my divine identity. When I was 4.5, I tagged along with my older sisters to a school event, a high school event, where my mother had taught in Samoa. My mom and some of the other teachers had put together this event for some of the senior classes. Now, we lived on a campus, and some of the students were boarding there. And the activity for that night was a movie night. I was instructed to stay by my older sisters because my mom had to help some of the other teachers prepare the refreshments for the evening. But I remember feeling so excited. I remember the makeshift movie screen, the blackboard covered with a white sheet. I remember wandering through the crowd of students, wandering around the dark gymnasium until I grew tired. I remember falling asleep in the back of the gymnasium on the tiled floor. I was awakened by an unknown male voice. He whispered in Samoan, "Ruby, I'm taking you home." I remember feeling tired. I remember him carrying me out of the gymnasium. Now, home was a walking distance from the gymnasium. We lived right next door. But that night, it was the longest journey home of my life. The stranger took me behind the gymnasium and raped me. I remember feeling the grass beneath my body. I didn't understand what he was doing to me at the time, but I remember that it hurt. I was so paralyzed with fear, afraid that if I told anyone, that he would return to hurt me. Hence, I vowed to keep it a secret, and it remained a secret for 13 years. To this day, I don't know the face of the man who raped me. Growing up, I gave him a nickname, which was the Faceless Man. And the thought of the faceless man fueled my hatred towards myself. I hated the way I looked. Most of all, I hated being a girl. I thought that girl was synonymous with weakness, frailty. But for some reason, I clung to this belief that I was a daughter of a divine being. And I had learned from in church, that God had an army of angels. Therefore, every night I went to bed praying, asking God to send one of his angels to take me back to heaven. I wanted to go to sleep and never wake up. At the age of 9, however, I learned of the legend of a Samoan war goddess, Nafanua, whose act of valor inspired my courage. According to this mythology, Nafanua was also the daughter of a god, and this god's name was Savesiuleo. Nafanua resided on the island of Savai'i, the larger of the two main islets that make up Samoa. Now, many years ago, desire for monopoly of lands and titles drove power-hungry men from the districts of eastern Savai'i to war against the West. The East conquered the West, but it was a triumph that did not last. One stormy night, the West, with newfound courage, led by a fierce warrior whose strength exuded a godlike power, retaliated with a vengeance. At length, the West prevailed. The success of the western districts of Savai'i, however, belonged to the warrior who prompted the retaliation, Nafanua. Nafanua, disguised as a man, led the men of her village to victory. I was so intrigued with this legend. Nafanua was she was a woman and a princess, yet she exhibited warrior-like strength. As a 9-year-old, the image of the delicate princess that I had imagined for myself dissipated, and in its place was a new definition of my divine identity, which was this: as a daughter of a divine deity, I had the potential to become a fierce, dauntless warrior. In my desperation, I sought refuge in this idea that I had to search for my inner warrior. And for years since that ordeal, it took literal meaning for me. Growing up, we had this plantation behind our house where I had created an opening, a secret spot in the opening of one of the hibiscus bushes. And I had concealed the opening with banana leaves and bamboo sticks. And in this secret spot, I hid my makeshift bow and my arrows made of sticks. And each time I had the opportunity to steal away from my chores at home, I would retrieve my bow and arrows, use my imagination, and I pretended I was fighting demons from an unknown world. Other times when my mom would ask me to clean my room, once again I employed my imagination and I pretended I was on this mission to save the princess, a task made possible by confetti, magic dust, and stick-like weapons that I had hid under my bed. My childhood make-believe games gave me temporary relief from the haunting memories of the faceless man. At the end of the year 1996, however, I was 13 when I experienced for the very first time just a tiny pinch of my true inner warrior. So that year, 1996, with my mother's efforts to constantly urge me to study hard, it helped put me in the running for valedictorian in my elementary school. Yes, we have valedictorians in our elementary schools in Samoa, and it is a big deal. That year, however, I took second place overall, but because the student who took first place was out of the country, I was asked to deliver the graduation speech. And when I stood behind that pulpit to encourage my class of 96 to recognize and believe in their potential for success and to venture out into success, I felt a trace of liberation from my pain. I was only 13, yet in a very real way, I felt like Nafanua leading her army to victory. My inner warrior had awakened. Seeing the rewards of my efforts in school incited a change within me. I no longer wanted to seek refuge in a make-believe world. Instead, I was determined to exert all my efforts into my schoolwork, and this time I aimed for first place, mostly because I wanted to seize another opportunity to deliver the graduation speech. In my endeavor to excel in school, and with the help of my mother again, I discovered another avenue of healing, public speaking. Growing up, I was very timid, and looking back now, I feel that it had something to do with what had happened to me. I mean, I disliked being around people that weren't family. I disliked crowd, I didn't want to talk to anyone, but mostly I disliked myself. I mean, oftentimes when my mom would send me to school, I would crawl under my bed and hide and cry because I didn't like the way I looked. So my mother decided that the cure for my timorous behavior was public speaking. So I entered every inter-school speech competition at the behest of my mother's persistent encouragements. I lost a lot of competitions, too many to count. But being able to stand before people, I felt like an artist. To see how my words painted various emotions on their faces, sadness, happiness, excitement, it was liberating for me. There was one speech competition in high school that I had entered. The topic that the contestants were given to speak on was, how can we eradicate women abuse? I was no longer fighting the faceless man in a make-believe world. Instead, my makeshift bow and arrows and confetti magic dust were replaced with words that I used to encourage other students to speak up about their abuse. Standing on that stage, behind that pulpit, I felt my inner warrior emerge. And I knew deep down inside that time would soon come for me to speak up about my own. In many ways, I was still afraid. Despite my fear of the faceless man, however, I gradually gained confidence in my ability to make it, in my ability to make something of myself. In the year 2000, my hard work, and with the help of my mom, paid off. I was awarded valedictorian for my graduating class in high school in the year 2000. When I stood behind that pulpit to deliver my graduation speech, once again, I felt my fear of the faceless man wane and my inner warrior surface, so much so that I was determined to do two things. Number one, I recognized that I had the ability to learn, which meant I had capability for success. Hence, I was determined to go to college. Number two, I was determined to finally reveal my secret to my mother. So one night in the year 2000, I sat down and wrote a letter to my mom, disclosing the details of what had happened to me. I was helping her pack her bags for a work trip, and I had slipped my letter into one of the pockets of her suitcase. She was supposed to be gone for 2 weeks. She returned home after a few days after she had discovered my letter. I remember she came into my room. She woke me up that night as she had returned, wrapped her arms around me, and sobbed. And since that day, she has been helping me to heal. But little did she know that her efforts to push me to study hard and to take up public speaking, her efforts empowered my inner warrior, which in turn aided in my healing. I went on to earn a bachelor's degree in biochemistry. Now, I did not give the graduation speech, but I did give a speech in college that meant more to me than any speech I've ever given. So while attending Brigham Young University of Hawaii, where I'd earned my bachelor's degree, I worked for the Polynesian Culture Center, where I met a man who was the president of PCC at the time, who recognized my ability to do public speaking. So he asked me to represent the students of BYU Hawaii and the Polynesian Culture Center to speak at a regional conference in Hawaii alongside an LDS prophet who was President Gordon B. Hinckley at the time. That speaking event changed my life. My inner warrior gained momentum. I was asked to speak on my experiences at BYU Hawaii and PCC, and as I spoke about professors and people at work who recognized my potential to speak and to excel in school, I felt inspired. I wanted to be the person to recognize someone else's potential. I wanted to help someone else. I wanted to help someone else succeed. Hence, since graduating in 2005, several years after graduating in 2005, I traveled to some islands in the South Pacific, including my home country, where I spoke in women's conferences, high school and college assemblies, and several religious events about the value of an education, because I believe that an education opens doors of opportunities that enable us human beings to flourish. Today, I am working on my master's degree in professional communication, and it is my hope to obtain a doctorate degree soon after, God willing. People face traumas in different ways. For me, school has been the conduit to my healing. And education potentiated my ability to see what I am capable of doing and to understand who I am capable of becoming. And in my endeavor to understand this, I have come to realize that while an education aided in my healing, there were pieces of my painful past that I was bearing elsewhere. My health, my weight. In 2011, I weighed over 250 pounds. Eating soothed my pain. In retrospect, my weight made me feel safe. It was my shield against predators. It made me feel like I was less of a target to predators. It made me feel safe. But I had suffered several health issues. I experienced diminished energy. There were times when I experienced difficulty in breathing. I felt pains in my joints, different parts of my body. And after my dad passed away in 2012 from esophageal cancer, I decided it was time to reform my health. So over the past few years of exercising and healthy eating, I lost almost 100 pounds. Reforming my health stripped away layers of insecurity and evidently residues of self-loathing. I finally came to a point where I came to feel comfortable in my own skin, where I can appreciate my body, myself. Today I continue to exercise, and the form of exercise that I love doing is CrossFit. The positive energy from the coaches, along with the challenge of the workouts, perpetuates my inner warrior. We all face difficult challenges. And for some of us, perhaps, maybe more than we can bear. But let me tell you this. After years of searching for my inner warrior, I have found it. My inner warrior is my willpower. And within each and every one of us, we have an inner warrior. And through our sincere efforts to flourish physically, mentally, and spiritually, we can awaken that inner warrior. In my efforts to flourish mentally, it emancipated me from the chains of fear of the faceless man. In my efforts to flourish physically, I have come to appreciate my body, to love myself. In my efforts to flourish spiritually, I have found forgiveness for the faceless man. In so doing, I have come to truly understand my identity. I am a child of God, and as a daughter of a heavenly king, I am a princess with the capabilities of a warrior, a hopeful, dauntless warrior. Thank you.